hello. Welcome. Hello if you're there already waiting for us. If you're not, then I can't say hello. We're going to give it 90 seconds like normal, just to give people a chance to join. But welcome on this rainy, cold day in the southeast of England. Alison, what's it like where you are?
Very hot, very polluted, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 3 times what the WHO says the safe pollution level.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, most people are inside, but it's very hot.
Yeah. Is that, I mean, it's taken a proper tangent already, but is that normal or is that just weird for this week?
No, I mean, Bangkok is quite polluted. And there are certain parts of Thailand that are called burning season, where they burn their crops, and that really elevates the pollution levels. So it is part seasonal and just partly how it is in Bangkok.
Cool. Thanks for that. That's good, because I'm going to Thailand in a couple of months.
I saw.
So yeah, it's nice to know that I'm not. Yeah, but Bangkok's. Yeah, I'm only in Bangkok for 2 days. I'm not going to get too many problems.
Yeah. That's right. Probably about right, Rich.
Yeah. Wicked. Oh, nice. At least you got some warm weather. I wish we had some here.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we? 90 seconds on the dot. Let's get started. If you are here already and you are listening to us, please say hello. Say where you are at the moment. If you're in Thailand or if you're in the UK or one of Alison's contacts, which is all around the world. I know you've got a lot of worldwide awareness, Alison, with your 20,000 LinkedIn connections. That was very impressive.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Obviously doing something correct. But yeah, if you are here, please say hello. If you have any questions as well to ask Alison, then please ask. It just adds more value to the episode. So yeah, I really appreciate that as well. So there you go. One person saying hello here. Hello, Christina. Christina?
Hey,
Hello.
Christina.
Rue. Hi, Rue. And
hi, Alex.
Anyway, is that Alex? I can't see that for some reason.
Yeah, so it's on the I've just brought it up under comments.
No, you are perfect. Hi, Alex from Bristol and Elizabeth. I've got a few people listening today. Hello. But yeah, look, rather than listening to me mumble along, let's get started. Very, very happy and privileged to have Alison join me today to talk about connection and the role of connection, and probably a little bit belonging as well in the workplace and how that really impacts us, both our well-being and our performance and just our lives in general. But we're going to try and keep it focused towards the workplace as much as we can, just so we can build that understanding and awareness of how that really impacts us and our careers. So yeah, thank you. I'll do a really quick introduction, and then I'm going to pass this mic over to you, Alison. So sure. For guys, if you don't know who I am, my name's Rich. I am the founder and director of a company called Employees Health, which is a workplace wellbeing company. I also own a leadership coaching company where we do one-to-one and group coaching for leadership, looking at leadership performance and team training to make sure that we're getting the best out of our people, very much linking performance to good behaviors, both behaviors at work, but also our wellbeing behaviors as well. So yeah, that's me. If you want to know more about what I do, some of the workshops, some of the speaking, some of that kind of stuff, please just drop me a line rather than me fill this podcast up with all that information. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Alison, please introduce yourself. Tell everybody what you do, who you are, blah, blah, blah.
First of all, thank you, Rich, for having me on today. And also, thank you to all my network who have taken time out of their lunch break or their busy days to join us today. We are both so appreciative. So all of this started for me quite some time ago. So my background when I first started work was around sales, marketing, commercial. I've been a founder of 6 successful companies. And in all honesty, when I was very young, I was using these skills of connection as a survival skill. They were essentially a trauma response that I learned and I developed and honed and then became absolutely fascinated by. So they are the golden thread that has run through every single thing I've done. So I ran a training company where I put 17,000 clients through the process, some of which I'm going to cover with you today. People like Google Campus, Gartner, and essentially what I've looked to do is to deconstruct the connection process in a way that is simple, easy to understand, and easy to action.
Perfect. And so what is it that you're doing now?
So I'm at a bit of a crossroads. I am currently looking to build an app for 16 to 18-year-olds on workplace readiness and life skills readiness. Partly because the UK government is prioritising that at the moment. So it seems like a really, really great time due to the data that they've harnessed around all of these skills. So that actually does touch on some of the things we're going to talk about today, things like communication skills, connection, presentation skills, all that good stuff. There's a really big skills gap, and employers, that's the feedback that we're getting from employers. But it's not just young people. If you take LinkedIn's 2024 skills research that they did, communications, there's like 10 different skills that people need to develop and perfect. They're the top 10 skills. And communication comes first, and then there are variations of the communication theme, like teamwork, negotiation. So it's this constant that is part of our lives. We know that we need to develop these skills. It's a lifelong journey. But yet, year after year, it still comes up again and again. So it's clear that the kind of training that's on offer is not wholly hitting the mark. So that's part of what I'm doing, 16 to 18-year-olds. And then the other part is actually just launching courses for corporate around this area, because that's where the bulk of my experience is.
Nice. Love that. And it sounds very interesting as well. Good luck to you on that. And I hope to see that coming through soon. Let's talk about connection. And let's get into it. The data, the statistics. Why is connection so important?
So just headline, I was reading some research when I was preparing for this, and one of the things that really struck me is that 70% of people who are looking for work have got jobs as a result of connecting and building a network. So connecting with and building, and obviously maintaining it and nurturing it, because networking is not a one and done thing. So that 70% really struck me, because so many of us go on LinkedIn and we're competing with hundreds of people for the same roles. Whereas if you have a contact in that company already, you're just shortcutting the whole process. So there's not going to be anything new here to people, but it's just worth remembering how important these things are. One of the other things is that leaders who feel like they have a sense of purpose around the work that they do are 9 times more engaged with their roles. So that whole, and they're also 2.5 times more likely to stay with the company. I thought that was a really interesting piece, because again, it's obvious, but not many people think about, am I aligned with the organization? Am I aligned with the values, the culture? And is this something that I can really commit to and put my all into? And I think that especially as you progress in your career and you get into leadership positions, these considerations are really important.
100%. It's interesting, isn't it? What I took away from that is the link between purpose and then the connection to the company.
Yeah.
That's good. Because my follow-up question to this was going to be connection. There is so many different elements to connection that make it so important to us as human beings in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I think that was one which straight away has already come out thinking, actually, if we have a sense of purpose, and that purpose can really connect us to the workplace and to the people in it.
Yeah, 100%. And the other great thing that it does is that once you're keyed into that yourself, it's a lot easier to bring that out in your teams and the wider business.
Yeah.
So purpose is an interesting one because it connects to something called spiritual intelligence, or SQ. Now, SQ sits beneath our traditional notions of emotional intelligence, EI, and IQ. So in other words, it's the foundational piece. And one of the 12 dimensions of SQ is purpose. And there are some really interesting, and it's spiritual intelligence is non-religious, by the way. It's just that additional dimension that we all have the capability to key into and to use as leverage. And it's particularly important when talking about and practicing connection as well. Is there anything you want to add to that before I go on to the next stat?
No, not really. I think I was going to dive into a little bit more of the data and the statistics. So I know you got a few there, which just on that. So if you want to go into that, please do.
Sure. So there was a study done last year by the American Psychological Association, and what came out of that, and they surveyed thousands of people across corporate in the USA, is that people who had formed strong connections at work had 50% better mental health outcomes. And again, that's a really large number. And then the flip side of that, as part of their research, is they noticed that 30% of people who do not have connection, whether it's in or outside of work, and that social formation, if you like, were 30% more likely to die early. And that's quite a shocking statistic, especially when you think about some of the stats coming out of the UK around loneliness.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, isn't it? I was just seeing, actually my friend sent it to me, and it was a reminder of the importance of trust. And that, I think that's a part of connection as well, right? But
100%.
The measurement of trust in teams, that if there is more trust and better connection built through trust, because that's one of the biggest ways you're going to build a good connection and belonging within teams, that create the highest level of team performance.
Yeah.
And this comes from Simon Sinek. It was a Simon Sinek clip, and they spoke about it was SEAL 6 team in America, and they didn't look for the highest performers. They looked for people who had maybe mid performer, but more levels of trust. If that person could be trusted, creating a team of trusted people rather than actually a team full of high performers. So our team performance can be impacted by connection and trust.
Yeah, 100%. I remember seeing something like that. It was the guy who did Start With Your Why. What was his name again?
Simon Sinek.
That's the one. Because I remember drawing on that piece of research in some training that I did recently, and it is really fascinating. But of course, one of the questions that brings up is, how do I do it? And I read this really interesting book. It's called Stealing Fire. And I've recommended, so some of the people that are on this call, I've recommended it to, because one of the examples that it gave, and this is specific to trust, was that the Navy SEALs, they do not have an assigned leader once they enter into a mission. What happens is that as a team, everyone scopes the scenario live, and then one person puts up their hand to lead the mission. And everybody trusts that because they know the work that's gone into that, and they know that that person has a strong sense of responsibility, has their best interests at heart, etc., etc. So there's that just really fluid sense of anyone can lead if they feel that they are able to, that they're well equipped to. And I really love that. And I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Trust in connection. I think the other thing as well, which you were talking about earlier on, which stood out, is that one of the talks I do, and one part of my program is around social interaction and social connection. And talking about longevity. And a study that really stands out is a study that was done and compared smokers to people with bigger interactions. As you get older, they found that if people who had who smoked but had higher levels of interaction and connection lived longer than people who didn't smoke and didn't have interaction. So the actual importance of connection can also help you live longer and create that longevity.
Yeah, I was reading that yesterday as well. It's fascinating, and again, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that's all the stats that I've got. But as you know, I put together 2 handouts for people, which have got a lot of stats, a lot of tips that we're going to be running through today. And I know you've got some more questions for me.
Yeah, I do. So I think we've covered a little bit of those different elements of what connection is, but is there any more that you want to, or even if you just wanted to reel off some of those elements within the workplace that really matter when it comes to connection?
Yeah, so I can give you a stat from one of my own clients, actually. So this is when I was doing some work with Gartner's sales team, and these are multi-million-pound deals that they work on. So it's a high-stakes environment, and there's a lot of customer nurturing throughout the process. And so I was working with their top salespeople, and I was around connection. And one of the guys that attended that session did 130% of his quarterly sales target within the first 2 weeks of the quarter. And people ask me, how is that possible? Basically, he understood what I was talking about when I talked about listening, and he put it into practice the following day. And of course, the results are incredible, because when you listen, people feel seen. They feel seen, they feel heard, they feel understood, and they feel validated. Now, some of my clients that I work with, when I listen to them, sometimes they talk to me about, this is the first time that anyone's ever really listened to me. Some of these people are like in their 50s, their 60s. So listening, and I've got a wonderful connection, Raquel Ark, who covers this topic specifically. So quick shout out if you want to look more into that area. But I cover it on my courses, and essentially listening is all around staying present, listening with your body rather than just your ears, and allowing the sound to impact your body. Because what happens when you do that is it bypasses your thinking, your biases, your assumptions, and you are able to capture the subtext and the true meaning of someone's words without your own filters interfering with the process. So that's just one element of connection, that piece around listening. And that's what that guy did. He just put it into practice.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's a skill which is not as easy to master as just saying it, right? Like, actually, active listening is a very hard skill to do, especially when you're running a podcast and you're trying to think of the next episode or read people's comments. It's even harder at that point. But
look, I'm going to pick you up on the active listening thing, because I'm not a fan of that.
Are you not?
No, I'm not.
Okay, go on.
I think that anything that tries to teach you a system takes you out of the present and out of being in connection with somebody. And I know this from experience of having taught it to people who want to be taught active listening. And I'm like, okay, so you've got to remember, think to yourself, ask an open question, ask a closed question, look the person in the eye, pause, summarize. No, That's not listening. That's following a system that will get you a very small part of the way there, but that is not listening.
It's hard to switch off, and that's what I think I mean by the art of just listening and not being able to let the mind wander. I think that's a really great skill to be able to have. But yeah, I think but going into the listening, I think it's an important element of connection. Combined with everything else. Yeah, I think it builds everything else as well. It builds trust. It does build some of these other elements we spoke about already.
Yeah, 100%, Rich. It's the foundation of all of this. And do you know what? I'm just going to include a quick tip now on how to listen, because it's so quick and easy. So basically, if you focus on your breathing and you focus on the air coming in and out of your nostrils, so you just take a deep breath in, you will notice that when you're doing that, your mind is completely blank. You cannot focus on your breathing and your thinking at the same time. It's physically impossible. So in that instant of silence, you're completely present, you're receptive, you're open, and you set your intention to listen and to connect. So all you need to do is just remain focused on your breathing and the person in front of you, and your ability to listen will automatically improve.
I'm going to try that. As a coach, listening is a big part of it, and sometimes you can go, you can go wandering. But yeah, no, thank you. I guess one of the other elements is this communication, connection and communication, and the difference. So I know this is a big part of the work you do and the key elements of your training. So talk to me, what is connection, what is communication, and how do they differ?
So there are layers to connection. But the main difference between communication and connection is communication is an exchange of information. And it's how we begin. It's how we begin. We can give people instructions. We can communicate what we want or what we need, but it happens on a more surface level. Whereas connection happens at a much deeper level. And you'll know that because when you meet somebody and you connect, it's like that little thunderbolt goes off. You know, it's like you've known that person all your life. Now, when I first began teaching this, people assumed that was something that happened by accident or it was luck. It's not. There is a system behind that. In fact, there is a data-driven system behind that, which will help you to achieve that with people who you've just met for the first time. So the two go hand in hand. We are always communicating in some way, whether it's with, I use my hands a lot. Our bodies are always communicating. Even when we're not speaking, we're still communicating in some way. There's that exchange taking place. And connection is the ability to recognize that deeper exchange and leverage it for the good.
Yeah. It's interesting. The thing I'm going to pick up on there is that spark. And yeah, sometimes you meet somebody, and I guess this is where, if I think about people who struggle with connection a little bit more, or building those relationships and belonging, it's probably because they don't get that spark very often, or they don't connect. I might be wrong, but my brain goes, okay, well, I get a spark when I meet new people who. What is it that is why that spark happens, and then how do we create that? What my brain goes to is like, so what is that spark? For instance, is one what builds it, and my brain goes automatically to similar interests, similar kind of purposes and values, maybe. But yeah, I'm going to let you kind of dive into that for me a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's a recognition. It's a recognition of aligned values, thinking, behaving, culture, there are so many things that so many data points that we could connect on. Like, I was chatting to somebody that I'm working with, and it turns out that we both have a love of linguistics. That was what I did at uni. And so language is a really big thing to me, and it is to her as well. In the same way, I was chatting to somebody who I personally think is one of the best coaches I've met, and I have met thousands of coaches. And this woman and I were chatting the other day, and where we connected unexpectedly was around this topic, about how we facilitate these connected conversations in the workplace and with our coaching clients. And there was some depth there, which I had not expected. So what I would say is this: connection is all around your intention. And that's what makes it happen. If you go into a conversation at work with the intention of connecting with somebody, the intention of making a positive impact on that person's life, of empowering them, whatever it is, I go in with all of those things in my mind, and a load more. But it is all around your intention. And then being prepared to just take your hands off the steering wheel and say, I am going to let this conversation go where it wants, because that's when those sparks, those gems come through, that nobody could have predicted. And that will not happen if you go in with an agenda. So there's a big difference between having an agenda and setting your intention. So I'm just going to pause there for a sec. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So I think people struggle still, right? Like if you look at the rates of loneliness within the workplace, and obviously the hybrid working essentially isn't helping, and COVID definitely didn't help. So there's something missing still, and some people are maybe prone to being more lonely or less connected in that sense of how do I connect with people, and due to that become more lonely. So what is that? Why do we have such high levels of loneliness in the UK at work? And how then do we build connection on top of that?
So there's a few different questions there. So you talked about remote working and hybrid practices. That's definitely a case for connection. We've got a mutual friend in Sally, and I always remember when I took my mental health first aid practitioner with her, she said a phrase that I'll never forget. And she said, ask people, how are you really? Because when you say, how are you? In the UK, we all say, fine, I'm fine. But when you're not fine, that's when you need that connection and that support from other people. So showing an interest in other people, I think people, do you know what, Rich? I think people overthink this. I just want to pull back for a sec and just say, this is really simple stuff. It's all about listening. It's all about curiosity, being interested in people. It's all about wanting to connect because you understand the value of that. You know, we talked about those stats earlier. They speak for themselves. We know how valuable it is. Why not let's start practicing it? So we talked about listening. We talked about intention. What we haven't really talked about is some of the processes, some of the actions that you can take. So once you've done that, you've set your intention and you're listening. And I've talked about handing over, if you like, control to the energy of the conversation. Being keyed in to someone's energy is essential for successful teamwork, especially when you're working with dispersed teams. because that is the only way that you'll be able to pick up what's really going on with people. It's from their energy, from their behavior, and then being willing to ask these questions, being willing to be a little bit vulnerable yourself. I don't see it as a vulnerability, by the way. It's just part of who I am. You know, all of these things. So it's not a decision that I make to be vulnerable. It's a decision that I make to be myself. And I think that's part of it as well. So the energy side, being yourself, being your authentic self. And then we talked about listening and we talked about intention. So if you put all of these things together, you've got some of the key components of connection there.
Yeah, I guess my brain goes, this is what my brain goes to, I guess, with no filter is, but you do, this is what you do and you do that well. And if you're an extrovert and you like people, then that's easy for you. If you don't like people, because there's a lot of people out there who don't like people and don't want to spend time, like, don't mean ultimately we all like, but aren't that fussed by being around people. Like I'm a yellow, right? So I love social and I love people as well. But there are people who maybe don't like it as much as I do. How then do they add to connection? Because they have a role in building connection with others and their teams.
Of course.
So how do we get those people maybe who aren't like us, aren't these sunshine yellows, to kind of become more social and to help build connection within the workplace?
So what I would say is, if you come back to the first thing you've just said, if you don't like people, you're going to really struggle to connect. So what I would do is double down on your communication skills, and allow connection to begin to emerge organically. Once you get more comfortable with communication, sorry. I'm an introvert. The only time that I am extroverted is when I'm training or talking about this kind of thing. And I think also it's having an element of self-awareness around what works for you, because connection is not one size fits all. It's customizable. And you have to understand that even the most extroverted people, if they're overtired, they're not going to feel extroverted. But yet they may still be in a room full of people and they need to connect. So it's about doing what you can with what you've got and where you are at that particular time, and not forcing it, because if you force it, that's the antithesis, that's the opposite of connection. So for people who struggle with it, I would say double down on your communication skills first and foremost, and ask for feedback. Ask for feedback on how well you're doing. And look, just coming back to something that you said near the beginning about the value of this, is that I have seen it in organizations that I've worked in where I've had to go in on a contract, network really quickly, build a massive network within the business in order to get the job done. And the reality of these skills is that they dismantle the silos that we're so used to seeing in corporate nowadays. They engender knowledge sharing in a way that goes way beyond, oh, let's teach our people to knowledge share, or let's embed it into the culture. So it solves a lot of problems, and I know that firsthand from recent experience. So these are skills that have far-reaching effects on the business. And that's why I'm saying double down on your comms first, and then allow yourself to open up into connection.
Yeah, I love that. You're starting with the very first things first, right? And as a coach, that's always the thing you talk about, the first things first.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a comment, and I think it's linking back to the how are you question. And as you can see, it says LinkedIn user here. I think this is Alex, the same person from earlier.
Yeah,
it is perfect. When people say I'm fine, thanks, I ask what would a great look like, And it's kind of very similar to what you were saying. I guess it's just for me, it's a follow-up question. What's the follow-up question to how are you in the year? I'm good, thanks. What's your follow-up question going to be to create a bit more communication?
Yeah. So if somebody said to me in a conversation, what would great look like? I'm not sure I'd feel 100% comfortable with that, because it just feels slightly forced, a slightly forced thing to put. It feels like a kind of coachy question, not a question that would normally come up in a normal conversation with somebody. It certainly hasn't ever come up for me in all the conversations that I've had. So I'm very keen on keeping to what comes through naturally and organically. And that how are you really is something that I really want to know. If I sense that somebody's not in a good place, and this maybe when I was leading a team, for example, I want to know why, because without understanding the context and where they're at, I can't help. And so I also understand that people might not be ready to talk about how they are really in that moment. So my follow-up question would be, look, completely understand, or it's fine if you don't want to talk about it. I am here for you. And whenever you're ready, if it's appropriate, let's sit down and have a chat together. So that would be my follow-up question, not a coachy question.
Yeah, I think
and no disrespect, obviously, to the person that's asked that.
Yeah, I think it's more of an interest of, is that kind of similar kind of thing. I think for me, the how are you really is really kind of a personal one, and would only work if you have a good relationship. So it's figuring out, as you said, the context and when that happens, right? Like if you are a manager and you have a relationship with one of your people, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. You could dive into that a little bit more, and actually, because you've seen there's an impact or seen something's going on. I think it depends on, as you said, the context, right? How you follow up with those parts.
I think it's also what type of leader you are.
Yeah.
More and more leaders that I talk to are fascinated by spiritual intelligence, for example, because they get that makes them a more holistic leader. It's an absolute no-brainer. And in the same way, they see it as mission critical to be keyed into their team. And I don't mean that in a kind of awful, nosy kind of pry kind of way, if that's even a word. I mean that in a really genuine way. Every team that I've worked with, they know I have their back. And they know that I am on their side. And so that in itself, I think, opens up a level of trust and safety. I've never had anyone come back to me and say, oh, I don't trust you enough to open up. This just doesn't happen. And I think also, if you struggle with that kind of thing with your team, you're the leader, take the lead, go first, and talk about the good, the bad, the indifferent. In other words, be a real human being. And if you're being a real human being, you won't have to resort to tactics or strategies or tools or any of that other stuff that people talk about. You can just be a human with that person and they'll appreciate it. And that's the essence of connection.
Yeah. Love it. I'm going to take a couple of steps forward just because I'm wary of the time. And this next section I want to talk about is a really important part to the workplace. And I think it's there's a recognition now of the role of leadership, and we're going to talk around leadership and what their impact is. But people listening, if you have any questions, please kind of drop in now, because once we've done this, we're going to answer some questions, hopefully. So, leadership. what's their role and how do they support creating connection in their organizations or their teams?
So I think the first thing is to do an audit, is to understand where you are on that communication stroke connection timeline. Work out, no team that I have come across is awful at connection or awful at communication, but there are tweaks and improvements to be made. So I'll give you an example of Gartner again. One of the great things that they did as a team is they had a team charter, which everyone participated in creating. And that's like their brand guidelines. That's the rules that we live and die by. The second thing that they did is they had a team song and they had a team gesture. Okay, it was something like this. Right, so, but it was unique to that team. And it gave them a sense of shared identity. So I have found especially when I'm working on contract, you're going into a team that already has an established sense of identity, perhaps not as overt as Gartner. And so for me as an outsider coming into that, there's a calibration process that needs to happen for the people who are in that team, having awareness around your values as a team, your objectives, your goals, how you like to be communicated with, and being able to convey that to a new person coming into the team is really important. So there's a dual exercise there for the leader to do. Is first take the temperature of where you're at with all of that, you and your team, and versus or aligned with the rest of the business. Because I've worked with some great teams who create their own mini culture, which is so different to the rest of the business. But within their mini culture, there is immense psychological security and trust and openness. So I think there's something there for leaders to make a very concerted decision around the importance of this and how they're going to put that into practice. So those are some of the first things. And then it's all about quite often allowing your team to take the lead. So like with the team charter that Gartner put together, we decided to do that because we wanted to bring the team together with shared values, shared understandings. And some of the things that were on that charter, we wanted people to be motivated by and committed to. And the only way you can do that is if everyone has a voice and puts that in, to creating something like that. I think the other thing, as far as leadership is concerned, is to understand where you want to get to with your team. So it's not just taking the temperature and getting that overview. It's, okay, here we are. I've got the data to back that up. This is not based on hearsay or anything like that. This is the data that I've accumulated, which is informing me as to where we are on that communication connection timeline. Where we want to get to is this. So how can I, as a leader, bring my team along on that journey towards that end goal? And that always needs to be connected up to the business imperative, the business goals. And people often miss that link. And it's a critical link because that ties into that motivation and purpose piece that we started off with. If the company, if the organization's goals are transparent, and as a leader, you're happy to voice those to your team, it helps them understand how they fit into the big picture. And that's, again, part of the connection process. Does that answer your question, or do you want me to go a bit deeper into any of that?
Well, look, we're going to go a bit deeper into it. I think
sure.
Right? I guess I have two questions. My first question is, you spoke about this scale, right? And when I thought about that, and you said from what you go from the communication to connection, I guess one of the key parts they need to understand is what that good connection actually looks like and feels like and is.
Okay, that's a great question. So at the far end of the scale, very connected teams, when I said earlier, how I am as a leader is I have your back. Mm-hmm. That's how the team needs to be with each other. I have your back.
Trust.
And that means being a little bit more observant, being a little bit more willing to tune into people, to give a little bit more of your time, if necessary, to help solve pressing business problems, because that sends out a message, a real message. We are in this together, and it's not lip service. Some of the ways that has manifested itself in teams that I've worked with is very, very lively Teams channels where we're dropping in memes and comments and jokes and stuff like that. And then another Teams channel, which is for really pressing stuff, which is, hey, I've got a proposal that I need to write. It's urgent and I'm missing this piece of information. And then 5 or 6 people jump on that and say, here you go. That's what you need. So it's teams that are really proactive in terms of helping each other out, supporting each other on a number of different levels, all for the good of the team, the business, the customers, and themselves. Because let's be honest, connection is a little bit of a selfish standpoint. I get so much out of it that I'm never going to stop doing it. And that's a purely selfish motivation on my part. But I know that it's a two-way street and the other person does as well. But yeah, there's that meshing together, that alignment, that rapport, which increases knowledge sharing, increases happiness, keeps the energy nice and high and light, and forges real connections within the team. So it means that when you go out for an away day together, you're not all sitting looking at each other going, what do we talk about? Which is just awkward.
Yeah, and happens. I think my brain, this is what my brain does, right? When you begin talking about safety and trust, I began to think about sport. And I think about some of the greatest teams, how their goals are all aligned. There's trust. They all believe in each other. And there's a sense of this, maybe sometimes they don't really like each other, and they don't have this best friend relationship, but they know that whatever happens, they're going to work for each other to get to the end goal and outcome of the team. I think that's a really important part. So that knowing and trust of we're all here together. And I think when you speak about Navy SEALs and when we speak about those kind of military places, I think that's even more so because it's life and death at some points, right? And so I think you need to have that trust and psychological safety to be able to speak out and feel that you can.
Yeah.
But then you should like that shared goal towards something. So that's how my brain went when you went to that. The thing I think, and I've not worked in a workplace for a long time, but you see it, is that people are now quite on edge, being able to have fun in case they get in trouble for having fun. And I think that's also a really big part of connection, actually being able to let loose a little bit and actually have fun at work as well. When I worked in the gyms as a personal trainer, the best thing about that is going there is actually having a laugh with people around you and actually being able to joke around. Because that's what brings excitement to work, right? So I think that's also another side to connection. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I'm just, I'm going to come back to something you said, but I just want to, from Christina, maybe ask instead anything exciting you're working on. I have used that I have definitely used that before. And how I've used it is when I'm talking to like a new connection on LinkedIn where we haven't actually spoken, but we're messaging. I'm genuinely interested in what they're working on, because if somebody starts talking to me about what is exciting to them, that takes them into a zone where it's very easy for me to connect with them. Their energy's high. And there's this great saying by Maya Angelou, and I'm paraphrasing, but it basically says something like, people won't ever remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel, right? So that question is a really good one for that. So to come back to what you were saying, look, you're never going to be bosom buddies with everyone. That's not what connection necessarily is. It's made me sad sometimes in the past where there are people that I have connected really strongly with, and I have assumed that that's a friendship. It's not. It's an incredible connection, but it isn't necessarily a friendship. And I've only, like, I'm going to be 62 in a couple of months' time, and I've literally only just learned this. So that's what I'm saying about this is a learning journey. So to answer, to kind of go forward from what you were saying about, sorry, actually, I've forgotten what you were saying. What were you saying?
That was a good question. No, I have to remember. I was just saying.
You said you were in the gym.
Yeah.
You were in the gym doing something.
Yeah, that being fun in
Yes, I have something that I want to say to that. So I've worked with teams where there is no fun. And genuinely, I just find that really sad, because we spend so much of our time in the workplace. Like, I cannot imagine going into somewhere day in, day out where I'm not enjoying it. So the easiest way for me to raise the energy and improve the atmosphere is to just point out something really stupid about myself, and make fun of myself, which is pretty easy to do, to be honest. And I find that doing that does a couple of different things. So it makes people laugh, it makes people realize you're human, and it gives people permission to do the same. You're sending out a message that it's fine, we're all human here. And so that has an impact, even on a granular level, with things like failing forward, understanding that we're human, we make mistakes. The message you're sending out is that's okay. So I'm always conscious of doing something which has multiple uses or can create an impact on multiple levels. Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree. Okay. Look, we have done very well. We're at the 53 minutes.
Past.
We've had flown past. Look, let's recap this. And what I'd like you to do is give top 3 tips or take homes for people to use when we talk about the word connection.
Yeah. So just to recap, we talked about listening being a foundational element, and we gave some stats detailing the networking side, how important that is in terms of career trajectory, mental health and well-being, that 50% figure, and also that real need for connection in the workplace. That was 70% of people want that. So listening, we talked about as the foundation. We talked about intention as the foundation. So you don't have to love people. But you know what? If you set your intention to connect, you're going to really surprise yourself, and you're going to enjoy people and relationships more. But failing that, we talked about doubling down on the communication skills side. Understand that this is a journey, and that connection has a large piece of personal development stroke self-awareness built into that. That's one of the main differentiators between that and communication. So a few quick tips. The breathing is really important. It keeps you focused, keeps you present. it keeps you receptive, and means that you can respond in real time rather than thinking, oh, I've got a question, or oh, I must remember to ask this. Don't do any of that, because if it's so pressing and so important, that opportunity will come up again. I think be your real self. And there's an amazing TED talk by a lady called Carolyn McHugh, and I highly recommend people go and watch it. But it's called The Art of Being Yourself. And she said it's simultaneously the easiest and the most difficult thing you will ever do. But understand that first and foremost, connection is humanity. It's around conversing, communicating human to human, and nothing else will do. So you have to make a decision about whether you're going to be okay with that and just venture into that space at your own pace. And then the last thing that I would recommend you do is to pay attention to the impact of sound on your body. So just decide that in the next conversation you have, rather than just focusing on the sound coming in through your ears, use your breathing to stay present, focused, alert, listening, and allow the sound to penetrate your body, because it's only in doing that that you will be able to pick up the more subtle forms of communication that are taking place. Does that help at all? Any questions? Anything? Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Alison, I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights into this space. It's nice to have that conversation. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Look, I've been doing this for 40 years, and what I will say is that there is still so much to learn with this. So it really is like your leadership journey. It's a journey without end, but it is a fascinating subject. And I'm so grateful to you for having me on today, and for everybody that's joined us. Anybody got any last questions before we finish up?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everybody who joined us as well. No, I appreciate it. It's nice to have this connection, belonging conversation. But for the people here, if you are still here listening to us, I am talking to Scott Robinson next week, and we're going to look at well-being in the finance industry. Scott Robinson is a senior leader in Deutsche Bank, but also the yogi banker. So he practices mindfulness and yoga and does that within the organization as well. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation around that. If you want to join, please do. Keep your eye out. Otherwise, this will be recorded and up on YouTube and Spotify. Everybody listening, thank you. See you all later. Nice for you to join. Please connect and ask any questions. Alison, stay where you are. Everybody else, goodbye.
Thank you so much.